If Jesus had no sin, then why did he get baptized? Why was Jesus so insistent on getting baptized? John tried to switch things around and have Jesus baptize him, but Jesus answers, "Let it not be so. Let it be so now, for thus it is fitting for us to fulfill all righteousness." To fulfill all righteousness. To fulfill what is right. To fulfill that which puts us in a right relationship. To fulfill all religious observances. To fulfill all charity or gifts of mercy. These are the definitions for the Greek word dikaiosune. And while we are at it, the Greek word pleroo, translated as fulfill, means to come to an end or complete, to have a full degree, to finish or complete an activity, to supply all that is needed, to proclaim completely, or to give true meaning. So Jesus insists on baptism by John to supply all that is needed to put us in a right relationship, to finish the religious observance by giving it its true meaning. Then this proves to be the case because when Jesus is baptized, something happens that is unique up to this point. The Holy Spirit descends in the form of a dove and alights upon him. And lo, a voice from heaven says, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." There are just so many questions today. Did Jesus not know that he was God's Son up until this point? Well, tradition holds that he was 30 years old at this point, so chances are good that he had had the talk with his family. And if we use Luke's gospel as a guide, we have Jesus at the ripe old age of 12, preaching in the temple, comforting his parents, telling them that he was in his Father's house. So this announcement is not new to Jesus. Nor is the descent of the Holy Spirit, which alights on him, the instance when he receives the Holy Spirit. He was never without the Holy Spirit because he never ceased being God. So this must mean that this is all for us. This shows us what happens in baptism for us. When we are baptized, Jesus supplies all that is needed to put us in a right relationship, such that the Holy Spirit may once again alight upon us, that is, to dwell within us. And we may hear the voice of God that says to us, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." In baptism, God adopts us as his children and is well pleased with us. But notice that the word that is used there is son, not beloved children. That is because we are in the Son, we are grafted into his body, and then seen as he is seen. But one more element is needed to fulfill all righteousness and allow this to happen, and this element needs to be supplied by us in our reading of the text. In order to see this added aspect, we need to look at the various water cleansings. In 2 Kings chapter 5, Naaman is told by the prophet Elisha that in order to cure his leprosy, which had no cure and was thus a death sentence, he needed to wash in the river Jordan 7 times. After initially balking at such an easy task in so basic a body of water, Naaman agrees, and 7 times he dips himself, or in the Greek, he baptizes himself. And afterwards, he comes out restored in the flesh like that of a little child. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul tells the Corinthians that their fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. here we have an entire people being led by a cloud, which incidentally is the same cloud that speaks to them with God's voice, and walking through the sea, one which, had God not intervened, would have resulted in their deaths, as it did with the Egyptians who tried the same thing. The Israelites left slavery in Egypt and passed through the waters of death unscathed, and exited the waters a free people. And an interesting connection to this is that after they noticed they were thirsty. They were in the wilderness 3 days after their deliverance. They finally came to water, but they grumbled to Moses because they could not drink the water, for it was bitter. They could not partake of the water that was supposed to give them life, because it only brought death. That is, until Moses, guided by God, took a log, also called a tree, and threw it into the water, which then became sweet. In order for the water to become life-giving, it required a tree of life. And one last connection that completes the elements needed to fulfill all righteousness. Jesus, when he was hanging on the cross, a tree on which he was hung, when just before he died, he looked up to heaven and cried with a loud voice, "It is finished. It is complete. It is fulfilled." And then he gave up his spirit. After he was dead, in order to prove that he was dead, one of the soldiers took a spear and pierced his side, and out poured water and blood. This blood added to the water through the tree on which he hung is what is needed to fulfill all righteousness. This then allows our atonement to be supplied for us, for we are baptized into his death. We are adopted as children in baptism because we die as he died. We are baptized into his death. We become his body, and so we too die, that we may become a new creation. This is what we supply in our baptism, our willingness to die with him. For some of us, it will really cost us. For most of us, however, the willingness is all that is required. The willingness to die daily to sin, that in death we may be born to new life. This is why the statement of God at Jesus' baptism is made, so that we may not enter into it uninformed. Jesus is baptized to unite his eventual death to baptism and thus fulfill all righteousness. We are united to him in baptism so that we too can experience what he did. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.